Should we get started, or do you want to wait till a few more come on?
We're just waiting for Lauren to connect to Facebook.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
All right, we are live.
Okay. Well, good evening. I wanted to thank you all for being part of this important time to discuss the importance of voting as people of faith. I'm Marian Boyle Roloff, clergy with the Moravian Church in Green Bay and part of the Moravian Western District Justice Conference team. And we are so grateful for the opportunity to join together with our interfaith sisters and brothers to reflect and to join in action.
And my name is Stacy Marisi Wheeler. I am also a Moravian clergy in Madison, Wisconsin. I have the privilege of working with the Wisconsin Council of Churches and Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice, and their staff folks, and namely Peter Bakken from the Wisconsin Council of Churches as Justice and Witness Coordinator, and Bonnie Margulis, Executive Director of Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice. So I'm going to turn it over to both of them. I'm so excited that we're able to have them. They've formatted a really wonderful webinar for us this evening, and brought all sorts of resources as part of their Wisconsin Interfaith Voter Engagement campaign. So we couldn't be more excited to offer this and to have so many folks from a wider circle than our own denomination, as well as our folks, be part of this. Thanks, Bonnie and Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Stacy. As Stacy said, I'm Peter Bakken, Justice and Witness Coordinator for the Wisconsin Council of Churches, and we are working in partnership with Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice on this project, which is the Wisconsin Interfaith Voter Engagement Campaign, which will carry out through the end of the year and to the election in November and slightly beyond. Just to say a little bit about the Wisconsin Council of Churches, we're a network of Christian churches and faith-based organizations that are committed to working together across our many differences. Exercising holy imagination, we help one another make courageous choices that lead toward peacemaking, social and economic justice for Wisconsin's most vulnerable residents, the vitality of the church, and the well-being of our neighbors. We connect 20 Christian traditions, including the Moravian Church, and within the state of Wisconsin, they have among them approximately 2,000 congregations and over 1 million church members. We work together and pray together for the unity and renewal of the church and the healing and reconciliation of the world. And welcome very much. I welcome you very sincerely to this webinar. Very glad that you're interested in this project and in the importance of voting. And I will turn it over to Bonnie.
Thank you, Peter. So I'm Rabbi Bonnie Margulis. I'm the Executive Director of Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice. We are an interfaith education and advocacy organization. We're based in Madison, but we are a statewide organization. We are Jews and Christians, Muslim, Buddhist, Baha'i, Hindu, Unitarian, Native spiritualist, every denomination that you can think of is part of our fellowship. And we really pull upon the wisdom of all of our different faith traditions to look to build a more just and equitable society. We are delighted to partner this year with the Wisconsin Council of Churches on our Wisconsin Interfaith Voter Engagement campaign. Our campaign has two goals. One, of course, to get as many people registered and out to vote as possible, particularly folks from traditionally marginalized and low voter turnout communities. But also the other goal is to connect people from different faith communities to each other, to build bridges between our different faith communities, to strengthen our relationships, our friendships, and to find ways that we can continue to work together beyond this particular election and into the future. really to engage in the work of what my tradition of Judaism calls tikkun olam, repairing the world. So we are delighted to welcome people of many different faiths to this event tonight, and look forward to a rich conversation. So I want to turn it back to Reverend Stacy Marisi Wheeler, who's going to give us some words of wisdom from the Moravian tradition.
Thank you. I don't know if they're wisdom as much as who are Moravians, right? I mean, there are those of us that have heard of Moravians, but just had a brief conversation about people investigating what exactly is a Moravian. So I won't tell you about that, but I will tell you about why Moravians care about social justice in the form of involved citizenry, and why voting is a part of that. Moravians have always been, or foundationally, have been a community-oriented group, faith group. We are pre-Reformation folks that actually were persecuted religiously and forced out of their own country, forced out of our own country, not mine, but theirs. And Moravians at that time lived together in communities. Once they found a safe haven to do so, they became communal livers, and not in the ways of other religious groups that you may have heard of that are more agrarian based. So unlike Mennonites and Amish, Moravians were tradespeople and craftspeople, and so they tended to create community in other communities, or start communities of their own that other people to and interacted with because of their trades and because of their hospitality. So due to that, they worked with many people along the way, and there was a foundational piece for Moravians called the Covenant of Christian Living, and that was really exactly what it says, a covenant, not a mandate, but a covenant that said if you are to be a community member and to share your witness, faith witness with the world, you have to do that in ways that are not only good for the internal community, but good for the outside community as well. So let me just share you one brief paragraph of that. That's under the heading, The Witness of a Christian Citizen. This foundational piece was first written in one form in the prior to Moravians coming here, but this was written in 1727, this form of it, for Moravians in this country who were living in either in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, or Salem, North Carolina at that time. One of the responsibilities under the Witness of a Christian Citizen is this: considering it a special privilege to live in a democratic society, we will faithfully fulfill the responsibilities of our citizenship, among which are intelligent and well-informed voting, a willingness to assume public office, guiding the decisions of government by the expression of our opinions, and supporting good government by our personal efforts. So that sounds pretty much to me like a good faith mandate, not biblical in our case, in our tradition, but certainly what the Moravians extracted from their scriptural foundations and felt were important to live within the greater part of society. Of course, the church doesn't live just in its own community, whether we are hospitable or not. We exist as a part of wider human society. And so with that framework, we feel it is a faithful duty and a joyful duty to be empowered and part of an involved citizenry.
Thank you, Stacy. So we are going to hear from some witnesses from other faith traditions, and we are starting with a video from Reverend Everett Mitchell, who is also a circuit court judge. And Reverend Mitchell unfortunately could not be with us tonight, but he made a video for us previously. It is part of our My Faith, My Vote, My Story series that we are putting together. And so we're going to hear from Reverend Mitchell right now.
Good evening. My name is Judge Everett Mitchell. I am the Dane County Circuit Court Judge as well as Senior Pastor of Christ the Solid Rock Baptist Church. I've been asked to kind of give my thoughts and my ideas related to voting and its importance and significance, especially as a faith leader and a person of faith who has chosen to use my faith to help motivate my entrance into my judicial role. I kind of got to first back up and say that, I've been in the ministry since the age of 15 years old, and I was called to preach at a young age. And a lot of the experiences that I saw during that time, especially both in church and in community, always gave me a drive to make sure that my faith was connected to something practical, that the work that I was doing was going to make an impact on the lives of individuals. And so even as a young person, I was always committed to, the ideals of justice, ideals of fairness and equity. And even though I didn't have mentors around me who were elected officials or who had chosen to be in elected offices, I did realize that at some point there might be a need for me to think differently about how do we activate and how do we use things more appropriately. For me, the idea of voting really hit home by the time I got to Morehouse College, because that's when I was really exposed to a lot of the civil rights icons. Obviously, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was an alumnus of Morehouse, was really a focus at the school, and it brought us into a about how do you access power, how do you use your power to be critical about systems that oppress people, how do you deal with systemic oppression, how do you break it apart, how do you reorganize it, how do you organize against it, and how do you rebuild it so that those who are the most oppressed could be the ones who are able to find their voice and use their voice for the power of change that they wanted to see in the world. I remember reading Howard Thurman's book, Jesus and the Disinherited, and he raised a fundamental question. He asked this question like, what does the Bible have to say, and more specifically, what does Jesus have to say to the people whose backs are against the wall? And so when you think about the role that voting plays, it is a significant aspect of standing up and using our voices in the manner in which my ancestors really required for us to do so. They sacrificed, they gave their lives. And as a faith leader, I think it's important upon me to make sure that I continue to push my community to do the same thing. The Black National Anthem definitely says, lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven rings. And so those ideals of voting is about lifting every voice, making sure that every voice is counted, and then working together in the world to ensure that we push hard to ensure that these voices are heard, and that systems don't marginalize or use what they can to keep people at home, but that we use our voices and consistently use our voices to see the impact can be made. We've always been a people who prayed, but also people who fought and people who, lobbied. You think about Thurgood Marshall, you think about Bishop Floyd Flake in New York, you think about so countless others who went to church on Sunday, but then by Monday, they were starting to fight again for the same civil liberties that all of us enjoy today. And so it's with that great love and great passion and appreciation for that sacrifice that I do the work that I do, and remain committed to ensuring that not just faith, but voices of faith are allowed to enter into this space and present a vision of a Jesus who's trying to answer, what do we have to say to the people whose backs are against the wall? God bless you, and thank you so much for this opportunity, and look forward to hearing more about the impact that we made among faith leaders and those who are trying to push for change and using their faith as a fire to do so. God bless you. Bye-bye.
Next, we'll hear from Rabbi David Cohen, who's the Rabbi Congregation Sinai in Milwaukee.
Thank you very much. Every people has a story. The Jewish story starts in the beginning with the creation of the universe. God creates the world and all that lives upon it, and as a final pinnacle act, creates human beings. God fashions people in God's own image, which means that every person is born with three intrinsic dignities. Each of us is of infinite worth, each of us is co-equal with each other, and each of us is an utterly unique individual. In addition to these three intrinsic dignities, God created each of us with free will. This idea was revolutionary in ancient times. Back then, people understood that time moved in cycles, like the seasons, doubling back on itself only to repeat the same patterns without variation over and over. Free will presented a new possibility, that people could choose to change the world around them. No longer locked into the patterns and cycles of the past, we were presented with an awesome responsibility. If we could work together to change the world, then we were obligated to perfect the world, to fix what was broken and heal what was sick. From the very beginning, God gave us a vote. Adam and Eve freely chose to eat the forbidden fruit and leave the garden. God contemplates destroying Sodom and Gomorrah, but first asks for Abraham's vote. In later Jewish history, recorded in the Talmud, Rabbi Yitzchak taught that a ruler is not to be appointed unless the community is first consulted. He further explained that in the Torah, Bezalel could not have been chosen to build the tabernacle without the community's approval. This deeply embedded ethic of political participation has guided Jews to enthusiastically participate in the American electoral process. That's a central part of the Jewish story. But I mentioned that in addition to a story, every people also has a set of memories, a curated subset of recollections from the larger story. If you look at the peak moments of Jewish memory as embedded in our holidays, you'll see that those holidays and rituals do not celebrate our people's victories or grand accomplishments. We have no holy day celebrating King David or King Solomon, no celebration of the conquest of Canaan. Instead, we consistently choose to remember the most challenging and often degrading moments of our past. The Passover Seder is a good example. The ritual instructs us, in every generation, each person is to see him or herself as if she too has come out of Egypt. The message is, you have to remember you were once a slave. No less than 36 times does the Torah tell us to take care of the poor, the weak, the stranger, those who are powerless and have no one to watch out for them. The imperative is, you have the capacity, based on your people's experiences, to have empathy for the downtrodden in your midst. You know that feeling in your bones. Convert those memories into acts of empathy and compassion towards those who need our help right now. Given our story and our memories and the imperatives they suggest, it's no wonder Jews have ascribed to government a role in helping those who need help the most. Judaism considers a core responsibility of government to be creating a just and compassionate society. And it is our privilege and responsibility to exercise our right to vote and to ensure that opportunity for others. This understanding of the role of government and the importance of every person's right to vote motivated Jews to play an active role in the civil rights struggle of the 1950s and 60s. Indeed, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, I'm proud to say, was partially drafted in the conference room of the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism, my denominational home. In sum, our memories and our mission sensitize us to the current allegations of voter disenfranchisement. Judaism's values compel us to speak out to ensure all citizens are afforded the opportunity to vote and to have their votes counted. If we don't, we have contributed to taking away the agency of others depriving them of their fundamental right to control their lives, and collectively squandering our God's given right as human beings to fix this broken world and heal our brothers and sisters' wounds. From a Jewish perspective, voting is a holy act and a sacred responsibility. It's what enables us, in the words of the prophet Micah, to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God.
Thank you, Rabbi Cohen. Next, I'm going to call upon Reverend Ryron Gumbel, who is the lead minister at the Milwaukee Zen Center. Ryron?
Good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak as a Buddhist. The Buddha, our first teacher, who lived 2,500 years ago, had that awakening experience where he saw that all life is one process and everything completely is one. So there is no dualistic and everything is one event. But humans have this natural inclination to feel that they are separate from each other. And so we feel that we need to protect this precious self, this separate self that we feel may be threatened by others. Maybe they want to take things away, and I need more than what I have. So this turns into greed or hate of each other. And that is the basic ignorance that unfortunately we live with. But we can overcome that by we can wake up to the true reality, just like the Buddha. And we can see that we are all connected and that we need to take care of each other. And the old scriptures say that one must not deceive another, nor despise any being in any state. That we need to love each other and help each other. And when somebody falls, we need to help them get up again. So unfortunately, the world is not perfect. And I think especially right now, we feel that the current administration is set on destroying these values. And I think people of all faiths need to bond together in an effort to save the values that this country was founded on, and try to right basic wrongs that have been committed in the name of democracy. Voting rights are not to be taken for granted, as people have fought for them with their lives. And we are benefiting from them, from this important heritage now. Let us make sure that our constituents take advantage of these rights in order to live the lives that they deserve, that we all deserve. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
All right, now we will begin breakout rooms. Before I do that though, I just wanted to share with the people on Facebook that I will be sharing our My Faith, My Vote, My Story videos with you while they are in their individual groups. So My Faith, My Vote, My Story project is we encourage individuals to share their stories, whether it be about barriers you may have encountered when registering or voting, an explanation on how your faith tradition impels you to vote and be involved, or perhaps how your faith tradition encourages you and others to ensure that everyone has the right to vote. We encourage you to send us your video. The link's going to be posted in this chat as well as the Facebook chat. So now I'll start the breakout rooms. One moment, please. All right. Sorry, everyone. Something happened with Zoom. I am slowly trying to fix it at the moment. So please be patient.
Hi, my name is Daniel Garlock, and I am an intern for the Wisconsin Council of Churches working on the voter engagement campaign. I recently graduated from UW-Madison with a degree in religious studies, and I'm also a member of Madison Friends Meeting. My family's been Quaker as long as I can remember, but I also have Jewish grandparents, and I went to a Catholic high school. So a lot of my growing up and religious education has revolved around learning what people believe and why. I think diversity of beliefs is exactly what makes voting so important. It's important to get feedback from a wide variety of people when making community or countrywide decisions. And in my Quaker community and in the Quaker communities I've been in before moving to Madison, most decisions are made by consensus. So everyone has a chance to speak their mind and share any concerns. And that process has led me to the belief that everyone deserves a voice. This translates directly into how I feel about voting and civic engagement. I think it's important that individuals and groups have a say in the decisions that affect them. I know it's not realistic to think large-scale political issues can have decisions made by consensus, but since we can't reach consensus, I think that makes every individual vote that much more important. I joined this voter engagement project because I recognize that not all of the communities in Wisconsin are being properly represented in the political sphere, and I don't think that has to continue. I think that working together, we can create more opportunities for people in Wisconsin to have their voices heard. We all deserve to be heard, and in the current political system, the best way to do that is to stay informed and always vote. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nick Utpal. I am a Lutheran Christian in Madison, and I am also a board member of Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice. As a Lutheran Christian, I find that God is working in our world, and God is working also through government and through laws and rules around us. And God does that for the care and love of all people and all of God's creation. As a Lutheran, I also find that we're pretty good sinners. We fall into corruption. We get pretty selfish on our own. And so it takes a lot of being turned back to be reminded about caring for each other and caring for all of God's world. And so for that way, it makes the most sense, I think, to have the broadest representation in our voting and our political engagement so that the most voices are represented and so that we can look out for each other. Sometimes we're not the best at being able to care for ourselves, and we need other voices, and some parts of this world don't even have a voice, and so it takes all of us to be able to speak up on behalf of those whose voices are stifled or whose voices are even silent. And so it makes me think of the story of Moses, where early in the Bible, God sends Moses to speak to this oppressive ruler, and Moses goes to say, "Let my people go." It's a message where he's advocating, where he's speaking on behalf of others, and it becomes then more of a movement. And eventually Pharaoh does have to listen and liberate and do some sort of justice. So we are all being called to engage, to be those voices that go to the pharaohs that might be turned in on themselves, and to speak up and say freedom is the right thing and justice is the right thing, that's for people who are being oppressed and hurting, that's for people who are in need of help and relief, that's also for all of creation, for waterways and soils and trees that would be oppressed and hurting, and for animals that are in danger. So that is some of my view on why we do this. Thank you.
Good evening.
Hi, my name is Larry, and I'm what's sometimes referred to as a cradle Lutheran or a cradle Christian, which means I became a member of the church when I was baptized as an infant 67 years ago at Evangelical Lutheran Church in Black River Falls, Wisconsin. As I grew, I was taught what it means to be a Christian by loving parents as well as other adults and pastors, so that when I was a teenager, I was confirmed, which means I got to say, yes, I'm a Christian. And later on, I was also married and ordained a pastor at that same church. So a big shout out to all of those of you in Black River Falls, which I proudly proclaim as my hometown. After 40 years as a pastor, I retired from full-time ministry and got to do what many of you do, and that is serve as a volunteer. I am currently a board member and president of a pretty cool interfaith organization called Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice. Our executive director, Rabbi Bonnie, is largely responsible for coaxing people like me to do these videos, encouraging you to get out to vote. Among other things, our organization works to bring people of faith together to value the importance of good government and to make sure we take the time and make the effort to vote good people into office to make good government a reality. As a kid growing up in the Lutheran Church, I can recall our pastors praying a prayer as part of our Sunday liturgy that went something like this: "Merciful God, we humbly beseech you to graciously regard thy servants, the President of the United States, the governor of this state, all those elected to Congress and our state legislature, our judges and magistrates, as well as all rulers of earth, that as thy ministers they may exercise authority according to thy commandments and for the good of all people." From this prayer, which I heard pretty much every Sunday, I learned that God not only cares about me and the people that were sitting around me in my church, God also cares that we care about those who we elect to government. Later on, I read Luther's treatise on good works, where he cites the prophet Jeremiah, who tells his people to pray for their ruler, even if in this case it's a foreign ruler, the king of Babylon. Still pray for him, Jeremiah says, so that we may live in peace. Now, from this Bible passage, Luther teaches us that God hates it when we only pray petty, selfish prayers that forget about other people and their legitimate needs. In addition to our own needs, Luther says, we need to pray for our neighbors near and far and his or her needs as well. And in so doing, we also need to pray for good government. In fact, Luther says that if we don't do this, God would prefer that we omit the Mass altogether because we're missing the whole point. Now, Luther didn't tell us to vote, nor did Jesus or the prophets. Why? Because at that time they were governed by rulers that they didn't get to elect. But from the words of the prophets and Jesus and other religious guides like Luther, I can infer that today they would be telling us it is our responsibility as people of faith to vote. I think Luther would be part of what one of our African American pastors calls getting the souls to the polls. It's part of our responsibility as faithful Christians, as well as citizens of this great democracy, to turn out to vote, or to do what is necessary to vote absentee. After all, one of the great things about our democracy is that no matter who you are or where you come from, you have a say in choosing those who serve you in government. You also have the freedom to express your views and to worship as you choose, which is no small thing. So that's my brief Lutheran take on why all of us, no matter who we are, need to exercise our right to vote. And may God bless us as we do.
Hi, my name
All right. I'm gonna give the group like maybe 3 to 5 more minutes at the moment. Again, I apologize for the tech issues happening right now. Just figuring out as I go, but yes. So would you mind taking it away, Marianne?
Oh, just like for us to discuss small group wise?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah, and I think one of the people, Ivy, she's alone in group 1.
I could bring her here, maybe. That could work.
Yeah, I don't know if she's still alone, but it might be worth bringing her back.
Yeah, I'll do that.
I understand how this happens. I've done it things.
It's not letting me do that. I can
Okay.
either bring everyone back or not, basically.
Oh, okay. Is Rabbi Cohen and Steve, are they with us still?
I see him on our main video. I've tried putting him in room 1, but it won't let me.
Yeah. Oh, Steve, I see is unmuting. I didn't know if they.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm here.
Okay.
So,
Cool. Yeah, I think since we didn't, the small group question was really what in your own faith tradition compels you to value the vote and the importance of voting. So that's really what the small group discussion was to be around. So I didn't, in the time we have, maybe to share a little bit about that. Looks like we got 3 minutes.
Well, yeah, this is Steve. I would say in our UCC tradition that For one thing, we see a great equality among members and clergy, and I think everyone has practically equal place in each of our congregations, and we have I think we pride ourselves on civic involvement, that we participate in the life of the world as well as in our life through our faith life. So I think we see it even as a responsibility to vote, as a way of fulfilling our responsibility as citizens. So we're very pro-voting.
That's awesome. I'm Moravian, and Stacy kind of laid out some of the Moravian stuff, but I don't know if that's really been emphasized much in our churches or denominations. So I think there's a lot of work to be done in that area. So it's kind of like we have people active in like civic engagement, maybe despite their church, if that makes sense. Or it's just not like a natural outgrowth of what we're doing or who we are as people of faith, and that should be. So.
All right, thank you so much. Again, I apologize for the tech issues happening this moment. I think I'm gonna return everybody now.
Okay.
And we'll go from there, I guess.
Hey, well, good to talk to you, Steve. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
Yeah, you too, Marion.
Yeah.
We're crashing your room because we only had 2 in our room. It was lonesome. Well, it wasn't really lonesome, but we didn't know what we were supposed to be doing.
We also had only 2. So.
But look at you
Hello.
now.
Hello, everyone. Sorry again for all the tech issues. I'm honestly not quite sure what happened or what's happening, but I'm returning everyone back. So we're on the main call now. Again, thank you for your patience. And we'll just wait for a few more people to return.
We're waiting for everybody to come back.
Just so you know, we never received any instruction as to what we were to be discussing.
Oh, I'm sorry. You should have had a facilitator in your room who knew what the question was.
Yes, I apologize again for this. There is a tech issue with the breakout rooms and it did not distribute as it should have. I am very sorry and thank you for your patience.
Okay, is everybody back? Lauren, I think if you could stop sharing screen, we'll be able to see everybody or see who's back.
I'm not sharing screen.
Okay, just we're good. So I wanted to introduce Reverend Greg Lewis. He is the president of Souls to the Polls in Milwaukee. Reverend Lewis, if you can unmute yourself and turn on your video. There you are. Wonderful. So I've asked Reverend Lewis to talk a little bit about his work with Souls to the Polls, but really to focus on voter suppression, something which with which he in Milwaukee is particularly and sadly familiar from our April 7th election.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I guess, to talk about voter suppression is probably matching that behavior with all of my life. we get all kind of suppression, and especially nowadays, and we get it from two angles in our community. The thoughts and ideas that there's a system in place that really doesn't cater to our needs as people of color, and the distrust of a system that people really don't think matters to them if they vote or not, because they think that it's a fixed fight and people are going to do what they're going to do regardless of how we vote. So we have to talk about how your vote is important in our inner fights in this community. And then there's the outer fights, the fight to or against folks in legislator seats who have worked very hard to make sure that our people stay frustrated and not willing to extend themselves to making sure that each and every one of us get out and express ourselves through civic engagement. We have, first of all, the mistrust is played upon by constantly putting obstacles like voter registration, making it more difficult for folks to register, especially folks who are not in the habit of doing that. And I know a lot of people say, well, all they have to do is register. Well, that's not true, especially when you already don't trust the system, and you don't want to really be involved with something you don't trust. And then I don't know if you have ever went through this registration process in Wisconsin, but it's almost like there's so many angles that you have to go study first before you go register. And then after all of that, you got to have a photo ID. And after all of that, you got to find a way to send it. And, most people don't have access to, internet and, the virtual world we live in right now. A lot of people are being left out, especially older audiences. And that's not just people of color. It's all of us, you just get left out. So, and when you start to work on that, there's so much and so many people being unreasonable about, really trying to extend a helping hand to folks who have these issues. As a matter of fact, they perpetuate the mistrust by putting obstacles in the way, like having the opportunity to go to the polls early. Now, this doesn't make sense at all. And there was a 4-week opportunity for us to go to the polls. And, you know, somebody thought it was a great idea to go to the courts and ask them to cut it to 2 weeks. You know, see, this kind of nonsense is hard to fight because it's hard to fight foolishness. You know, the Bible says to argue with a fool, you kind of look like one. And that's what we've been lowered to doing, is to be so foolish. You know, we have a pandemic and we want folks to have an opportunity to vote without risking their lives. So we say, okay, 4 weeks, we can early vote and really push that. And someone thinks it's a great idea to go to the courts and cancel 2 of those weeks. See, that's just foolishness. How do you battle that? But I think all of us together speaking about it and raising a fuss is important. And it's got to be people of all races and colors. It can't just be me hollering and screaming and making a fuss about all of this, because we still have to work this together if things are going to change, and your heart has got to be in the right place if we want to extend those changes. So you have to, you know, no matter what, I don't care what rules you make up or what laws you make, if your heart is not in the right place, if we as people of faith are not really sincere about keeping our commitment to honoring the faith, if we're not sincere, we're just wasting our time. That means that we have to sacrifice for one another in a way that has never been done before right now. We have to do that, men and women of God. We have to do that, and we have to do that right now while this opportunity has come and the door has been opened and people are admitting that there is racism. And it's obvious that the enemy is not going to stop. Every time we try to alleviate the pressures of a dignified effort to engage, there's some kind of nonsense that comes along and puts itself in the way. You know, so now the question is mail-in ballots, is it corrupt? Now, people have been mailing in ballots for years. And now all of a sudden, when we find a way to eliminate the possibilities of us having to go out and be connected in crowds, because that virus is very, very, that virus is real. I know that because I almost died. But when we have people who are insincere and don't care, we have to learn how to fight back. We have to learn how to stick together. We have to learn how to lift our voices. We have to do that together. We have to count together. We have to come out together. We have to make sure that the significantness of what we're doing is seen by people so that they can have an idea that there is some hope. Because now we deal with a hopeless majority who don't understand that they really do have power. So now when I'm looking at things and I'm calling over 500 faith leaders, and those are mostly faith leaders in my community, but there's you in your community. Are we going to stand together? Are we going to do what's right? Can I count you? Can I count your votes? Can I say we have this many people on our side? We are men and women of faith. We bring a moral capacity to a situation that needs to be negotiated. Can I count you with that? You know, can I say I have this many votes in this church and this many in this church, and we all come together because our slogan is we're an army of faith, the power of 100,000 souls to the polls, people working together on the same ideas and issues and in a thought process that we can do something together, that we can manage to come together on something without fussing and fighting, without having to realize that, you know, we do have things in common. We do have the idea that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is in the heart of us all. We do want our citizens to succeed in family structures and education and health and wellness and crime and incarceration and civic engagement. Having that power together is so important. Like the street issues that are going on right now. The one thing that is so powerful about all of that is black, white, Hispanic, yellow, brown, Indian, all these people are working together. But when will the church start to work together and trust one another? And that's important, because we need to say that, listen, Governor, listen, Mayor, we have 100,000 votes that we pull together. And then it can even be more, but we have these votes we can pull together. Now, if you want to help our situation, we will support you like the Dickens. But if you don't want to help people who need help, we can find somebody who will. But I think it's got to be something concrete to bring that to a reality. I just can't keep talking about what I've done. So that's why I'm calling all these folks and I'm counting votes right now. And I'm counting over 50,000 in our community right now, and I'm not near about finished. But you have to be a part of what we're doing. If you truly believe that justice should be in this equation, you have to be a part of what's going on right now. And even if it doesn't totally go your way, it ought to come together so that we can talk about how it can benefit everyone. That has to be a start. And I think the biggest obstacle we have is working together. Because I don't care what they say. If we work together, there is no way that we can't win, because the victory is already ours. We just have to organize ourselves to make sure that people see it, our community sees it, that your community sees it, and they see why, and we work together. And we have to understand that, you know, Black lives do matter. But not only you have to understand it, our community has to understand that. And that's how we win. That's how we avoid, you know, being depressed and suppressed and disenfranchised, because there's nothing anybody can do. And we have to get in a power position, because and then I'm not going to be long. I'm sorry. I know I've gone too long, but we have to be in a power position so that we can make people understand that we are not going to put up with the nonsense that has been going on for so long. And that's why we need to count ourselves as working together, and we can count those votes, and we can demand that somebody react to situations that are keeping our communities underdeveloped, because it's not just hurting us, it's hurting the whole city, it's hurting the whole state. You're only as strong as your weakest link. So these obstacles have to be addressed, and we have to address them in a way of togetherness. We have to address them in a way of being, you know, totally committed to one another, and making sure that even though it might get difficult sometimes, that we stick together and we negotiate, and we be the moral compass for communities as the church, as we ought to be. And we negotiate fairly, and we negotiate in a way that seriously connects to communities that need our help the most. I'm sorry, I might have went a little bit over. I didn't have a watch, Rabbi Bonnie, but you know, if that's all for me, you know, I'm fine with that. And maybe next time we'll. So thank you, thank you very much.
Thank you, Reverend Lewis. You are always passionate and always inspiring, and we appreciate your words.
Thank you so much.
So I want to ask Eileen Newcomer to speak to us. She's the voter engagement manager from the Wisconsin League of Women Voters, and she's going to talk to us about voting in Wisconsin and what's happening right now. It's an ever-changing landscape here in Wisconsin. For those of you who are outside of Wisconsin, we do encourage you to connect with your local League of Women Voters and get involved with the work that they are doing in your locale. Eileen?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be part of the presentation tonight and to just be here and be in the virtual room with people who are looking to get engaged in voter outreach and voter advocacy and looking at voter rights. And thank you so much, Reverend Bonnie, or Rabbi Bonnie, for inviting me to be part of this and giving the League such a nice shout out to open up. So could we go to the next slide, please? I'm gonna have some, I'll be the one who has slides for their presentation. I'll be that person tonight. But before I begin and go through the voting process in Wisconsin, I wanna make sure people are on the same page about who the League is and what we do. We're a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization of women and men committed to making voting free, fair, and accessible to all. The League is staunchly nonpartisan, meaning we don't support or oppose a candidate or party. Our mission is to empower all voters and defend democracy, and we do this by educating voters and advocating on issues. We know democracy is better when more people are involved and when our representatives reflect and are responsive to the communities they serve. Access to voting is inherently an equity issue, and it's one critical way we share power with each other in our country. As a grassroots organization, the League is built from the ground up and relies on the work of dedicated volunteers who do outreach and advocacy work in their communities. We have 20 local leagues around the state, and I really encourage you to check them out and link up with them if it's something you're interested in. Next slide, please. So the first thing when you're walking through the voting process to think about is whether or not somebody is eligible to vote. And I do want to quickly acknowledge that not everyone is eligible to vote in Wisconsin, whether because of their citizenship status, their age, or felony status. On the screen are the eligibility requirements for people to vote in Wisconsin. So you must be a US citizen. You must be at least 18 years old on or before Election Day. You have to have resided in Wisconsin for 10 days prior to the election. Now I have an asterisk there because there was a recent court ruling that is pending right now and will likely change this requirement to 28 days. But for right now, it is 10 days. And then you also must not be currently serving a sentence, including incarceration, parole, probation, or extended supervision for a felony conviction. But I do want to emphasize here that once somebody has completed their full sentence, their right to vote is restored in Wisconsin. And so that's not true for every single state, but it is something that's true for us in Wisconsin. And then the final eligibility requirement is you must not have been determined by a court to be ineligible to vote. This most often happens through a guardianship decision. And for you to have your right to vote to be removed in a guardianship decision, the court has to expressly limit your right to vote. Next slide, please. So one of the most important things that you can be doing to advocate for voting and being part of your community is making your plan to vote and then reaching out to your friends and family to do the same. Make sure that they know that their vote is important to you. A lot of people aren't registered to vote or have never voted before because nobody's ever asked them to or walked them through the process of how it works. Helping somebody create a plan to vote is one of the most effective ways to increase voter participation. And it helps people see themselves as voters and will give you an opportunity to address any questions they have as you walk through the steps. The framework for my presentation is I'm gonna walk you through some key questions to ask people as you're helping them make a plan to vote. And then I'll review kind of the requirements that are associated with those questions. As you're talking with people, it's important to know that you don't need to be an expert, and just pointing people to the correct resources where they can get good information is a huge help. Also, as you're talking with people, especially friends and family, if you're going to be doing this relational organizing that's going to be talked about later today, a little accountability can go a long way. So if you're friend or family member knows that you're going to check up on them and say, hey, did you vote? How was your experience? That actually will encourage them to go and vote because they know somebody will be asking about it later. Next slide, please. So one key question is asking, when will you vote? So thinking through, are you going to vote absentee? Are you going to vote early? Or are you going to vote on election day? If you're going to vote absentee, it's important to know that in Wisconsin, any registered voter can request an absentee ballot, so you don't need to have an excuse. The deadline for the August election is August 6th. And people should plan ahead if they're going to vote absentee to make sure they have enough time to receive their ballot, to complete it in front of their witness, and to return it. The Postal Service recommends mailing a ballot back at least a week before Election Day to make sure it's received in time. Another option is early voting. It's a great option that gives voters flexibility, and it's a safer voting option during the pandemic because there's fewer people at early day locations, and you can choose what times you go. It does vary by municipality, so people should check with their municipal clerk to find the dates and times. Early voting is another thing that is pending with that court decision. It very likely will be limited to 2 weeks before Election Day here very soon. And then finally, the third option that people could choose is voting on Election Day. And it's really important for people to have the opportunity to vote on Election Day. It gives, in Wisconsin, we have Election Day registration, and a lot of people take advantage of that to register and vote all on the same day. It's also really important for accessibility reasons because in Wisconsin, we don't have an ADA compliant absentee voting process. So people who are blind or visually impaired do not have the option to vote absentee and vote privately and independently because of the way the system works. So by going in person, they're able to use the accessible voting equipment and cast their ballot privately and independently. Also, the accessible voting equipment is not required to be set up during early voting. And so that is an opportunity for people to use that important equipment that allows them to vote. And then, some key dates in Wisconsin. August 11th is our next election. It's the partisan primary, and it's the primary for the congressional races, state Senate, state assembly, and then various local races. And then on November 3rd is the big presidential election, and then the general election for the offices we're voting on during the primary. Next slide, please. Do you need to register at your current address? It's another important question to ask. We ask it in this way because people often think that once they register once, they're good to go. But if you have moved, you do need to re-register at your new address. And by asking this question, you can kind of help people think through, have they moved since they last registered? Have they changed their name? And you can also offer to help them look it up online and check out if their registration is current. And if they do need to register, you can help them explore what option works best for them, whether it's online at myvote.wi.gov. People could do that up to 20 days before the election. By mail, by mailing it to their municipal clerk. Again, they can do that 20 days before the election. In person at their municipal clerk's office. And they can do that through the Friday before the election, or letting people know that they can show up and vote, register and vote on election day is a great thing to let people know about. Next slide, please. So this third question about is how are you getting into your polling place, or how will you return your ballot? And so this question is important because it gets people thinking through, what is how are they going to get to their polling place? What is the time of day? Do they have a ride? Do they know where their polling place is? and just kind of thinking through what is the process they're actually going to physically do to go and vote. And then if they do identify, like, a good follow-up question is, you know, do you need a ride? Because this is another opportunity for you to give help to somebody if they need a ride or want assistance dropping off their ballot somewhere. Next slide, please. Next question is, what do you need to bring with you? So if somebody is registering to vote, they will need a proof of residence document. Some really common options are the driver's license or state ID with the person's current address on it, a utility bill, a pay stub, bank statement, credit card bill, or anything from a government entity that has the person's name and current address also is an acceptable proof of residence document. So it's important on the proof of residence document is that it shows the voter's name and current address. And then in Wisconsin, we also have the photo ID law. So in order to get a ballot, people must show an acceptable photo ID. And what this does is this proves, this shows who the person is. And so some common options that people use are their driver's license or state ID card, passport, military ID. Some students use their IDs as well. One thing that's really important to note is that for photo ID purposes, your address does not need to be current on your photo ID. Next slide, please. So the next question you can ask is, what resources are you going to use to learn about the candidates? One of the barriers that we hear that prevents people from voting is that they don't know who to vote for and they're having a hard time finding candidate information. So one thing that you could do is to share resources of where they can find unbiased candidate information. I'm going to lift up vote411.org because that's the league's resource, and that's where we post candidates' answers to our questions. Local community organizations and especially local leagues often hold candidate forums too, so they can be in-person opportunities to learn about the candidates. A lot of them have been retooled to be Zoom events like this one, and so even more people can participate than ever before. Candidates' websites are also a good way to learn about them and what it is they stand for and what information they want voters to know about them. And then also recommend, you know, following the news and seeing any articles or interviews that the candidates participate in. Next slide, please. So I also wanted to leave everyone with some ideas of like concrete things that you can do advocacy-wise as well. So we're really promoting absentee and early voting hard right now because of the pandemic. And if we have more people voting safely at home, the fewer people are going to be exposed to COVID, the fewer people are going to need to go into the polling places on election day, the fewer poll workers we're going to need to expose to COVID. And by requesting an absentee ballot now and early, that relieves some pressure on the clerks who have to go through all of the steps to make sure that elections happen. And if there's a big balloon of requests right before the deadline, it just can cause there to be delays in people getting their ballots. I would also recommend that you get to know your clerk and consider working with local government to expand early voting options. Identify some absentee ballot drop boxes that could be used. A lot of people don't vote absentee because they are distrustful of the postal service, and having drop boxes gives people an option to return their absentee ballot without having to rely on the postal service. One thing I would also note on that is in Wisconsin, they've recently added smart tracking codes to absentee ballots. So we now have greater transparency to where ballots are in the process and can identify if they get held up somewhere. Another great thing that you can do to serve in your community is to be a poll worker. There is a great need for poll workers right now. And we have learned that a lot of barriers can be overcome if we have more and better trained poll workers. They really, really make a big difference. Another thing you could work with your local government on is having a plan to make sure that in-person voting is conducted safely. Like make sure they have proper PPE, they have proper social distancing guidelines, have enough polling places to ensure that there aren't lines of 2 and 3 hours long of people having to wait around the block to go in and vote, without access to bathrooms or food or things like that. Another great thing you can do is encourage multilingual voting resources in your municipality. I would also say if you go and vote in person, use the accessible voting equipment. Oftentimes, although it's required to be set up, oftentimes it's not, or the ink cartridge is dry. And so by you using it, you ensure that it's set up and ready to go for people who do need it, and really encourage you to do that. And then finally, we really welcome you to join with the League of Women Voters. We're really glad that you're taking the time to learn more about voting and how you can get involved. We have lots of volunteer opportunities, whether it's phone banking, texting voters, normally doing local in-person outreach events, and a slew of other opportunities. So next slide, please. Just a couple resources to share before I'm done. I really recommend anyone who wants to help others with voting get very familiar with the myvote.wi.gov website. From here, people can register to vote, they can request an absentee ballot, they can find their polling place, and they can see a sample ballot and learn about the candidates before they go and vote. So it is a really great resource, kind of a one-stop shop for voters in Wisconsin. I'm also going to plug our website. We've got great voting information on there as well. And we have information in Spanish, which can be very hard to find in Wisconsin. Next slide, please. So that is all I have. I did want to share my contact information. I'm happy for anyone, if they wanted to talk more with me about this, they can reach out to me via email or phone. And that's all I have. Thank you so much for letting me join you this evening.
Thank you so much, Eileen. That was really wonderful and very, very helpful. So I want to call upon Peter Bakken from Wisconsin Council of Churches to talk to us about different ways that people can be engaged.
Yeah, thanks, Bonnie. And a lot of what I was prepared to say has been covered pretty well by Eileen. But just to think about now, what can you do with what you've learned? How can you get involved this election year in ways that will strengthen our democracy? And I've just got a few suggestions kind of in three main buckets. First, as Eileen mentioned, you can not only make your own plan to vote, but encourage others, your friends and family, to do so, all conveying all the sorts of information that she's just shared with us to make sure that they can get out to vote. And I just want to also suggest that, you can do this even with people that you may disagree with politically. Getting out the vote is a nonpartisan activity. And even if the person you're talking to, will not necessarily vote the way you want to, it's a good way to kind of open the door to discussion. Why, what do you care about? Why is it important to you that everyone votes? And it could open the door to some interesting conversations. Now, very soon, the Wisconsin Interfaith Voter Engagement Campaign is going to be launching an initiative to help you do this sort of outreach to your friends and family and circle of acquaintance. What, as Eileen mentioned, is called relational organizing. We've signed up to use an app for an iPhone or smartphone called Empower. If you sign up to use the app, every couple of weeks or so, you'll get a call to action. And these will be messages that you can pass along to, say 10 or more friends, relatives, acquaintances about remembering to vote, what to do to vote absentee, where to find information about candidates or voting information, and so on. And for us in Wisconsin, that's a really important service because things are changing, things are really fluid and confusing, and it's really important to make sure that the right information gets out there. And quite often there are folks that are trying to actually spread false information about elections, about the day of the election and so on. So it's really important to be able to get the right information out there. And when you're communicating with your friends, with your family, with your acquaintances, you are much more trusted messenger than many of the other sources which they'd be getting information. So I encourage you to look forward to information about how you can join this initiative within the campaign for relational organizing. Second, you can work to promote voting and share voting information through your congregation, sharing information in worship programs, newsletters, social media. You can invite someone from your congregation's leadership to give a sermon or a talk on how your faith tradition calls you to civic engagement, sorts of things we've heard from a number of people in the course of this webinar. You can find materials from either your denomination or religious body or from another faith-based organization that can help you inspire members of your congregations to be civically engaged and to vote. And kind of the third general area is to volunteer with a voting rights organization in your community. It could be the League of Women Voters, League of Conservation Voters, ACLU, the NAACP. A lot of the traditional get out the vote activities like voter registration events and canvassing have had to be put on hold during the pandemic, but there are still ways that we can get this information out to people. And all these groups are really working on, how can we do this under the conditions of the pandemic? There's some things that, we can still do, but things like giving rides to the polls, that's an important thing for people that otherwise can't make it or who may not, for physical reasons or for, their own distrust of the system, are reluctant to do. But if you do that, then you have to be very, very careful to do it safely under COVID, under the conditions of the COVID pandemic. But through any of these organizations, you can find all sorts of opportunities for helping out. Phone banking is one thing that's very easy to do, physically distanced, calling people to remind them to vote, give them the information that they need to vote. Postcard writing was mentioned in one of the breakout group that I was in. Not to influence them how to vote, but to make sure that they do vote and know what they need to be able to vote. You can help by becoming a poll worker on election day, as Eileen mentioned, or a poll watcher, which many organizations will field to make sure that the rules are being followed at a polling site. And you can also check with your municipal clerk, again, as Eileen mentioned, about applying to be a poll worker, or maybe they need some help with preparing or mailing out or processing applications for absentee ballots, that sort of thing. So it's 8:30 now, so we're running a little over time. So I appreciate everybody sticking with us through this. But at this point, we'll be saying goodbye to those that are joining us on Facebook. Thank you so much for joining us, but please don't tune out just yet. Those of you on Zoom will be going to another brief breakout session for about 5 minutes to talk amongst ourselves about what will be our next steps and commitments in this work. And we'll be linking a form. It'll be both in the Zoom chat and in the Facebook comments, a form that will enable you to record and to share your commitments for specific things that you intend to do in this effort. And after that, those of us that are on Zoom will reconvene briefly for some final words. So thanks again, and goodbye to those of you on Facebook, and the Zoom folks will shortly be going into breakout groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So Lauren has put